In the weather today, a major weather system moving through the Rockies, and we can see some lake effect snow in the Great Lakes. Let's take a look at the weather around the world. Temperature extremes over the past 24 hours have ranged from 114 once again at Agrabis Falls, South Africa, and at the other extreme, minus 53 in Siberia at Teplý Kluč. Another look at Agrabis Falls. Yeah, that's rocky terrain. No wonder it is so hot, and that must be the falls right there. And in Siberia, Teplý Kluč looking like this. Looks like a World War II monument. And if you like snow and cold, I guess that's probably a good place to be. And a good place to be for weather charts is right here on Forecast Lab. We use actual AWIPS graphics, actual operational charts. No cornball graphics, that's my motto. No television graphics, nothing like that. But we'll be looking at some experimental graphics coming up shortly, and I think you're going to like them. Here's some of those good graphics. This is a digital atmosphere plot. This is one way of pulling up a surface analysis. And I did used to be an operational forecaster, and this is certainly a program that I would use, and of course I'm biased because I wrote it. But what you see here, the isobars, the thickness, this is from the Canadian RDPS model. It's one of my favorite for this purpose. And I've added the METAR data, the fronts by hand. So this is human analyzed, and I've got the precipitation fields on here as well. And we've got Canadian cold air coming into the Midwest, into the central U.S., and even into the Rockies, and you're going to get a look at that shortly on those experimental graphics. Some warm air across the southwestern U.S., a nose all the way into Grand Junction. And you can tell because of that 44-degree temperature and southeasterly flow. So even though it is a little bit cold in the Four Corners area, it is biased a little bit due to the high elevation and the fact that it is winter and they've had some wet bulbing taking place there. All right, let's start out in order, starting with the northeastern U.S. They are under northwesterly flow, quite cold, 20s into New York and New England, and 30s and 40s south into New York City and Philadelphia. The satellite imagery showing no real problems. There are small craft advisories all up and down the coast. Northwest winds gusting to 30 knots, kicking those waves up to 3 to 6 feet. In the interior, cold air advection, cumuliform clouds, stratocumulus and cumulus, and out on the Great Lakes, lake effect snows starting to show up. And you remember that ice storm after Christmas last year out around Buffalo, same sort of situation. However, for today, the cold air advection, the destabilization, and upper dynamics much weaker, so nothing like last December. Heading down into the southeastern U.S., couple frontal zones. This is the old front, dividing the 80-degree temperatures in Miami from the 60s and upper 50s up north. Then we have this fresh incursion of cold air coming down through Tennessee, approaching Atlanta, and moving through the Huntsville area. The satellite imagery showing a shortwave moving through the Carolinas. This is the old system that produced clouds yesterday in Texas, and it's rapidly opening up and getting caught in the prevailing westerlies. Further south, we've got this hybrid subtropical jet and polar jet, partly associated with that southern frontal boundary, but it does have some anticyclonic curvature suggestive of tropical origins. There it is on the 200 millibar chart, has the appearance of a subtropical jet, but it is also tied in with that frontal system across Florida. In the south central U.S., we see that 1040 millibar high pushing cold air south. A cold day in the Panhandles ranging from 20 at Clayton to 30 at Amarillo, contrasting with about 70 degrees at Corpus Christi, so quite a range of temperatures here. The satellite imagery does show that that is a dry front, sitting somewhat like that, but we do have upslope flow, Out there in the higher terrain of Colorado and New Mexico, the flow is moving like that, has just enough humidity to form stratus and even some fog in the higher elevations. And you can see the outline of the terrain right there. That's pretty much the pass right there east of Albuquerque, and there's the Sangre de Cristos. Not much of that low cloud coming around to the west side, but very likely some easterly flow through the Rio Grande Valley. And there's the surface plots. You can see the cold temperatures, 24 degrees at Klein's Corner, 32 there at Moriarty, and gusty east winds at Albuquerque. So those canyon winds right there along Interstate 40 are definitely blowing. And another way you can see that is the 40s and 30s east of the Sacramento Mountains and 60s with south winds around Deming and Truth or Consequences. And as we move north, we do get into that winter weather system there along the Utah-Colorado border. And with plenty of cold air available, that's going to help charge this baroclinic weather system. And as it moves east, tomorrow, we've got a winter storm warning in effect for parts of Kansas from Salina to Dodge City, Garden City, and up to Smith Center. Looking for 4 to 6 inches of snow in that warning area all day Saturday into the evening. Most of that develops as an upper-level wave arrives from the southwestern U.S., and that's currently producing snow showers in the Four Corners area. In the western U.S., also getting some cold air. You can see those 20s and 30s up there in northern Nevada, and some of that coming south. North wind, 58 degrees there at Las Vegas, and that front has just passed through there. Winter weather advisories for southwestern, central, and northeastern Utah. Looking for about 2 to 5 inches of snow there. And then we're going to get into some freeze watches and warnings for Las Vegas and the northeastern California deserts, possibly as low as 22 in some areas. And we're going to see freeze warnings posted for parts of the San Joaquin Valley tonight, tomorrow night, Monday night, Tuesday, so on. Temperatures down to 29 degrees around Hanford to Merced. Also around Edwards Air Force Base as well. In the northwestern U.S., no real problems, but there is some fog hanging around. Walla Walla, Washington had a freezing fog advisory this morning, and you can see more of that fog up there in the Fraser River Valley of British Columbia. Freeze warnings for coastal Oregon from about North Bend to Reedsport down to Port Orford. Temperatures tonight could be down to 29 to 33. And all along the coast from Monterey Bay up through Eureka, through Oregon, and all the way to Grays Harbor, we have a moderate risk of sneaker waves. And those are surprise waves that run up on the beach and look like this. And if you're out on that beach, you can get inundated very easily. So be cautious if you're out on the beaches over the next 24 hours. So the northwest states looking like this, offshore component. South of that high pressure area across British Columbia and Vancouver Island. Up into Alaska, they have had a massive Pacific surge into the state, wide open with southwesterly flow in those 40s, coming all the way up towards the Alaska Range. Winter weather advisories today for freezing rain from the southeastern mountains through Talkeetna and Wasilla and back towards Aniak. And across Canada, that blizzard has died down, but we are getting the northerly flow through the Northwest Territories. The temperature's back there, not really all that cold, most of it above zero and up towards near freezing. Yeah, that's close to 30 degrees. That's very mild. But up to the north, though, Elamir Island, Eureka, you can see minus 36 up there. So I might have been justified putting a front maybe like that, little Arctic front. So that'll be something to watch when we come back for Monday. Further south, western Canada looking pretty good. Downslope flow there, temperatures in the 30s, so a little bit warm. Some of that warm air coming into Manitoba. And then further to the east, cold air advection. And with some upper level troughs approaching that area, we are looking for snow squalls around the Cape Breton area. That's right up in here. Could be winds up to 40 miles an hour, snow to 4 inches tonight and Saturday, and that'll spread into southern Newfoundland later in the day on Saturday. And there we have it, the complete overview. And we're looking at the AWIPS graphics here. Everything you've seen over the past 6 or 7 minutes, that's not intended to be weather news. It's to ground you in what's happening around the U.S., where the air masses are, where there's weather going on. And it's not very glamorous going over a bunch of regional weather, but it is important to be able to visualize what's happening. So now, with all that information, hopefully you're watching and paying attention there, because we can go into the actual graphics and start digging a little deeper into that. So we have this large high-pressure area across the north-central U.S., extending into a ridge out across the northwestern U.S. There's that weather system there in the central Rockies. Fronts about like that, just kind of reviewing that. We've got some sort of front, where was that? Yeah, the first initial front out there, and don't worry about that. Okay, so now we're good to go. Strong cold air advection across the northeastern U.S. So you have told me that you like cross sections. I've heard that repeatedly, and I worked on this over the past week, and this is what your Patreon support goes toward, the time that goes into preparing these graphics. And what you see here, this is going to be kind of interesting. We're going to start out with this cross-section in the eastern U.S. that goes from about Quebec City south across the Bahamas, a little bit east of there. And this point right here that corresponds to this side of the graphic, this top part of the dot corresponds to the right-hand side. So this is up in Canada, this is down in the Bahamas. And everything in between is along that axis right there. Okay, got it? So this is a cross-section. That's going to be the surface. 500 millibars, that's going to be about 20,000 feet. 200 millibars, that's about 40,000. And 100 millibars, that's about 50,000. And we're looking at isotopes, potential temperature. That's the black lines. That's roughly what we use to look at density or temperature. You don't have to worry too much about what it means if you don't understand it. What's important is where we have gradients like here, that indicates an inversion or an air mass contrast. You can see a big inversion up here. That's the stratosphere. And the color shading, that's going to be the wind velocity in knots. You can see the scale right here. So that's going to be a jet. In fact, that's the polar jet. And then we see that hybrid polar front and subtropical jet. So where is this? It's about 3/4 of the way over on the graphics. So you go 3/4 of the way up on that. And that's going to be roughly over Massachusetts. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to work from east to west like that. We are not going to go backwards because I'm not going to confuse you. We're going to go straight from the east coast to the west coast without turning around. Okay, here we go. Yeah, you like that right there. Okay, we can see some transition zone right there. That could be a front underneath that jet. And we go a little bit further. We're heading onto the east coast. You can see things change as we come on shore, moving through Pennsylvania, the Carolinas. So that's pretty cool there. All right, as we get further to the west, there's the Appalachians. We can pick up a little front. If you look at that horizontal gradient of potential temperature, this is a temperature gradient. And that's going to be on the northwest side of the Appalachians. So we're talking about Kentucky, Ohio, in this area here. So that's the front. So just to show you, that's our cross-section right there, and we're hitting it right there, and the gradient is in here. Okay, let's go a little bit further. Heading west, and we're starting to get into that cold air mass across the northern plains. You can see the frontal boundary starting to sneak southward. I think it's going to be right in here, around the Ozarks. We go further into the plains. You're going to see that boundary start to come south as we go into Texas. There it is, going further and further south. You can see the frontal inversion, and there's a jet right over it. And you're going to see the Rocky Mountains pop up here, because we're just about to Denver. And that cold air mass goes all the way down towards Roswell, Carlsbad. That's it right there. The fresh Canadian cold air mass. You can see it tops out at about 690, 680 millibars. That's about 11,000 feet. And that's just thick enough to come over the mountains. So as we actually hit those Rocky Mountains, see that right there? We can see some of that cold air coming across, but not quite all of it. And some of it is banked up right there. That's going to be around Wyoming. So we're looking at that cross section, and that front is about right in here. So it's right up there in that mountain range. So a lot of interesting stuff to look at here. And then we see the other, well, some sort of other upper level front right there in the southwestern U.S., Utah. We go further out into Utah, Arizona. Now we're starting to pick up that cold air mass starting to come south. This could be an old frontal gradient. And we start going into Nevada and California. And I think that's going to be that cold air mass right there. And above that we have some sort of inversion. At least that could be an old frontal inversion, or it could be a subsidence inversion. Not really sure which. I don't have enough information here. I think out here that's almost definitely a subsidence inversion, because that's getting into that subtropical high. Then we go a little bit further. This is all the cold air mass. It's even cold aloft right there across the Great Basin area. And we start going out to the west coast, and we start going offshore, and we hit that marine layer. So hopefully that was a fun trip, and we'll do those pretty regularly. If you like those, please comment and let me know. Here's the upper level chart for this evening, a large vortex across Utah, and it's helping to produce some instability, helping to get those snow showers going, and the actual dynamics, those are out ahead of that low, and the jet rotating around the west, south, and southeast side. Going forward into tonight, we see these disturbances ejecting eastward into Kansas, helping to get that snow going, and some of those dynamics emerge out into the Kansas City area later on Saturday and up into Illinois for Sunday. So since we're 17 minutes in, we can go ahead and put that together. There's our weather system there on the Utah-Colorado border going into tonight. That moves out across over Denver. They don't get too much out of that. But further to the east, that snow does break out across Kansas, a little bit better access to that tropical moisture from the Gulf. And further south, some freezing rain possible in the Interstate 40 corridor. There's our weather system coming across Wichita for later Saturday, and then moving up towards the northeast with the rain-snow line about like that. And then going into the remainder of the weekend, looks wet out in the eastern U.S., cold air advection in the wake, so it will be quite cold in Minnesota, Iowa, the Dakotas, and fair weather and very cool with this cold high. This is somewhat of a plateau high and northwestern U.S. polar high, covering that area and keeping the weather pretty much suppressed. And some of the valleys out in that region will have radiation fog, and some of that will be quite persistent. A coastal low developing Monday morning, and we'll be covering some of that as we return for the Monday program, although we'll have moved up into Nova Scotia pretty quickly during the day on Monday. And that will be it for this episode of Forecast Lab. Here's a little bit of footage from yesterday around the San Antonio area. Hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you again on Monday for the supporter edition. And if you're not a supporter, we'll be back on Wednesday. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.